Hey everyone, I'm Allan Chesher from Centennial Games. I'm talking about my game Kingmaker. Kingmaker is a 5-player elimination assassination game set in a 14th century Florentine fantasy world. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the design methodologies and ideologies going into the way that I designed Kingmaker. First thing is like theme. The first thing I thought of was like I wanted to make a game that was all about basically killing and attacking your friends and doing it secretively, but then also lying to their faces while you do it, and then kind of reveal that backstabbing and espionage while it's happening. And so the first thing I thought of was kind of the Florentine houses and the assassinations of the 14th century. So the theme and the idea going into it was that there's this 14th century Florentine fantasy world, and then within that world there's no magic, and there's no dragons, and there's no goblins. It's kind of like magic in the way that we believe in magic now, where it's in, movies and stories, but there's no actual evidence. You can't go and cast a fireball against someone. So everything within the game, in terms of concept and mechanics, all needs to basically fit within this 14th century Florentine fantasy theme. And if it felt like it belonged in that space, then it was okay. And if it didn't feel like it belonged, like goblins, then it wasn't okay. The next thing is Playstyle. At the time when I was kind of making the games, before I came up with this idea, I came up with a big 4X kind of game that took 2 hours and half an hour to set up and half an hour to explain. So I wanted to make a game that was much quicker, much shorter, much easier to make and manufacture with components. And so I came up with this idea where there's going to be a game where you essentially have a set of cards in your hand, and it's a diminishing resources game where you have your cards in your hand and you decide, I'm going to play whatever card I wanted to. It had no cost, there was no mechanics or engine building. It wasn't about who could build the most income over several turns to get the biggest card in the way that Magic the Gathering works. So I wanted a game where you pick your attack card or your special ability card and you can just play it. And there's no consequence in the way that you play your cards. The real cost of the card comes down to the effective resolution of that card throughout the game. So you could play a card, like in Kingmaker there's a card called the Marshals, which is a counterattack. So you can kind of troll everyone into attacking you, and if you play that and it counterattacks everyone, it's really effective. But if you don't get attacked that turn, it doesn't do anything. So every card in the game kind of has a really high effective value and it has a low effective value. So that's the kind of game that I wanted. And it kind of ended up being this voting majority survivorist style game with lots of lying and backstabbing and alliances, which kind of worked into the theme of 14th century Florentine fantasy. Wait, I'm going to do my notes. The next point is story. As I said, once again, it's all within this same theme. And I kind of came up with this idea that any problem that I would come across while developing the game, the resolution for that problem would be another way to further enhance the story. So when it started out, you were assassins and you were killing each other. You had 3 life points or a dice with 3 hit points. You would attack each other, you would get hit, you would lose a point. But in terms of manufacturing, I didn't want to make 5 dice for each game. So I figured I could not make 5 dice, and I could replace those dice with 3 individual cards. And so what I did is I got rid of the dice, I replaced them with 3 cards each, so that meant 15 more pieces of card instead of 5 dice. And I thought, what could I turn those 3 cards into? And I decided on them being the royal families of each house. And then that means that each one of those royal family members was another character, was another story, it was another backstory that would further envelop the player into wanting to play the game or caring about keeping their guys alive. It also meant there was a nice side effect that what happened is when you were attacking someone, you weren't attacking the other player, you were attacking their royal family. So what it did is it removed it away from player-on-player attacking and player-on royal family attacking. And then the players all of a sudden are in the background, and then, you know, they're essentially king-making. And also the voting nomination system, in a way, is king-making. So after a while, it became really obvious that the name of the game should be Kingmaker, which just kind of was a nice side effect of trying to take advantage of a problem, approaching it as an opportunity to further enhance the story. And the last point is that needed to feel right, and because it was a problem, I looked at it and I thought, this needs to feel right. The game was actually 7 players originally, and I looked at it and I thought, 7 players, and I have a maths brain, so I approached it as a maths kind of problem. And I looked at it and I thought, there's 7 players, each player has 3 characters, each character represents a life. If it takes you a minute to play a turn and kill off a guy, then that ends up being a 21-minute game. So I thought I'll make it a 5-player game with 3 lives, and ends up being a 15-minute game. So in terms of manufacturing, it was 70 cards, 3 lives each, 5 players, 15 to 20-minute game. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?